Gaudy. So Gaudy. Gaudy stats. Gaudy stats. Good God, that's Gaudy. Welcome to Gaudy Stats.
With Ben Simmons.
What's on the menu, Benny boy?
Oh boy, have I got a pod for you. It's a big one. Oh, it's a feast. A feast of sorts, indeed. But it's delicious. Let me tell you that. I'll tell you that much. Today, we go back to back. We once again talk to my friend Samuelson, who we just talked to. But you know what? We weren't finished. All right? We were not done. We had unfinished business, okay? That was probably a 1990s action movie, Unfinished Business, probably Steven Seagal. Was that an action movie in the 90s? No, actually, it was a 2015 film with Vince Vaughn. Oh, wait. I remember this. This is one of a string of just horrible Vince Vaughn movies. I used to like Vince Vaughn, but he is on a losing streak as a leading man. I think he might have actually fallen out of that category, leading man. It's kind of sad, man. You guys seen Made? The movie Made? Classic. Underrated movie. He can be really funny, but this movie, I believe, got a 10% on Rotten Tomatoes. Unfinished Business. With James Franco's brother in it. Sienna Miller. What? This ain't a movie podcast. What you doing? I know it's not, okay? I'm already getting off on tangents. Anyways, we talked to Samuel about one of the great long bombers in the college game. A guy who's hoisting up threes at a rapid rate. He's taking 10.5 threes a game. Trae Young, everybody. We talk about Trae Young. We also talk about NCAA basketball versus NBA basketball. We get into all sorts, like LeBron. At the very end of the pod, we start talking about LeBron. It's a wide-ranging, as I said, feast, a buffet of sorts. Tons of sports talk, tons of basketball talk, a little bit of football thrown in there, but mainly basketball. And I really enjoyed it. It was great talking to Samuel again. We went back to back. What can I say? With this guy, you know, the last pod we talked a lot about food, and I love talking about food, and we're gonna do more food podcasts. So get ready. But with this, we're on the side to this buffet. We're gonna strap on the feedbag and keep munching, folks. How about a wet Tex-Mex burrito? You might be like, that's disgusting. A wet burrito? What the hell are you talking about? Folks, it's a big ass burrito with all sorts of things inside. I'm talking about grilled chicken or grilled beef. Let's do grilled steak, okay? And then you got some rice, some beans, some grilled peppers, hot sauce, salsa. You wrap it up in there, and then on top you put maybe some nice chili verde. I sound like I'm from Kentucky because I am. Chili verde salsa. You put that on top. It's so good. Jesus Christ. I need to eat some lunch because why am I always doing these pods when I'm ravenous? I think that it turns me into a banshee of sorts. Yeah, but we're gonna do a wet burrito, and then of course we gotta do guacamole on the side of that. So on the side of a side, we're gonna have a bowl of guacamole, and that's with the feast of a pod that we're gonna listen to right now. Oh God. Okay. I gotta go. Hope you enjoy. Thanks, guys.
Simmons,
My friend.
what's going on?
Nothing much, man. Nothing much. I've been looking over these Trae Young stats, and
Yeah.
I'm getting all hot and bothered.
Should we get into that straight away?
Actually, I think we should just talk more about Kentucky Hot Browns for another hour, and then we can talk about Trae Young.
The previous episode,
It's wild.
we went very deep into the hot brown. Like if you stuck a ruler into a hot brown, it would be like several inches up, Mornay sauce covering like several inches of the ruler.
We went neck deep, I would say. So some people would say something crude, like going balls deep, but I'm not gonna say that. I'm gonna say say neck deep. We got deep into it, but it was the first ever Gaudy Stats food podcast, and I think it went. Besides the horrible audio issues, I think it went over really well. And
yeah. Other than the fact that I sounded like I was trapped in a basement somewhere for the first half of the podcast, which you said made you sound like an ogre.
Yeah.
Which I disagreed with. I thought you sounded normal, and I just sounded like I was being held hostage somewhere. I thought it turned out well.
Well, I appreciate that. I think it sounded like, I don't know, like you were trapped in a jar, almost like in a Twin Peaks episode. Like I had confined you to a jar almost in some sort of mystical way, and I was loud, and every sound I made, whether it was a sip from a cup of tea, or scratching my scruffy face, or coughing, I think it was super loud, and you were like this little confined underwater noise coming back at me, and it just technical difficulties. What can you do?
Do you remember the book The Indian in the Cupboard?
Yes, I do. How could I forget?
About the small Native American man?
Yes.
That was me. that was me on the podcast.
I had you confined to a cupboard.
I was shouting up to you. Ben, listen to me about Philadelphia sports and food.
It was great. There's gonna be more food pods because let's be honest. I mean, food. Everyone's diet. It's all statistics. I mean, it's how many smoothies did you have this morning, or how many bowls of cereal, or how many calories. It's all stats, man. So it just kind of goes hand in hand with stats. I admit it's a bit of a stretch, okay, but I'm rolling with it.
No, I'm good with that. I'm good with that.
Excellent.
Now, Simmons, today we're going to talk about basketball. I have come on this podcast previously, and we have talked about weird football stuff, most notably box scores and season-long statistics in the NFL, the National Football League, for those unfamiliar.
Yeah, you got to say it when you got to do the Mark Schlereth National Football League.
The National Football League.
Or ESPN, all those talking heads do that.
Yeah, and that's I think that's a contract stipulation for some of them. They have to say the whole thing.
There's a National Fishing League, so you got to get them.
Yeah, you don't want to be vague about it. You have to be specific. Yeah. So now though we're to my bread and butter, which is basketball season, specifically college basketball season.
Mm-hmm.
College basketball is my favorite. I know that it is not your favorite. You're more of an NBA guy, but I feel like through statistics and through a lot of the fascinating and incredible history of college basketball, which often involves players who would go on to be stars in the NBA, but not always, right? I feel like we can build a bridge here and connect.
We can. Bridge over the river Gaudy. Yeah.
Yeah, the River Gaudy. It's like the River Styx, only more recent, I guess.
Yeah, well, right? When I think of Styx, I think of the 80s. The 80s,
True.
Man. And I was really into them in high school for a while. I don't know if you remember that.
Mm-hmm.
I went through a short phase where I was playing Mr. Roboto, really loud.
Everyone has their Styx phase.
Everybody. I was rolling into the parking lot, just blasting it really loud.
Yeah, I briefly lived in Chicago, and the most Chicago moment was when I was in a place, like a diner type place, and there was in Come Sail Away, was playing. It just seemed like a very Chicago type moment. I don't know if are they from Chicago?
They might
just
be.
feel like they might be.
There's a band called Chicago, I think, from Chicago.
Indeed.
There's a band called Rush from Chicago as well. But
I thought Rush is Canadian. Aren't they Canadian?
Maybe you're right. There's a Rush Street. I thought it was named after
Chicago and Canada are the same to me, though. I've been in Texas for so long.
Yeah.
It might as well be Canada.
Yeah,
at this point.
Indeed.
Anyway, look.
We're building a bridge.
College basketball is my favorite. We're going to build a bridge here, though.
Let's build a bridge.
It's my desert island sport. My desert, if I could have one sporting event for the rest of my life, it would be the NCAA tournament. I love the single elimination format. I love the fact that every game, many games in the season, anything can happen. Every game in the season matters, which is not to say that it doesn't matter in other leagues. And actually, in the NBA, when you have a series, it's a lot more just in terms of who the winner is.
Yes, that's what I love about it.
I do think part of the drama is removed from the fact when you have a 7-game series. Oftentimes,
it's relentless.
So I love the winner go home format in this particular event. I love the fact that there is so much history. Listen, it involves imperfect players and imperfect teams. Oftentimes, right? You have these little small schools who play in high school gyms. You have these huge college basketball machines that churn out NBA draft picks.
Yeah.
They all come together for this 3-week event where if you have 2 bad hours, you're out, right?
Yeah. Wichita State will knock you off if you're not careful.
That's right. Or in the case of Wichita, sometimes when they are 35-0 and the number 1 seed, they have to play Kentucky, which had a team full of future NBA players, and they lost in the second round.
Well, that's how dated my college knowledge is.
That's from.
I was thinking like 5 years ago.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's from 2014 that happened.
Ron Baker.
But I love Ron Baker, exactly. I love the history of the programs. I liked how on a previous episode when Dan was talking about the Sixers, he was talking about how he talks to his dad about games in the 70s and the 80s related to Dr. J and Moses Malone. I think that's something that is really where we grew up in the state of Kentucky, where college basketball is king. I think that's something that really brings together generations of basketball fans. So I thought that was cool to hear. I am a Louisville basketball fan, and I became a Louisville basketball fan in large part then because my grandmother was, and because my dad is.
Yep.
And I think that you'd find the same thing is true with University of Kentucky fans, with UK fans, that you have these fandoms that span generations, and they are rooted in a sense of place and time. And if you went to the school, you were physically there for 4 years, that's one thing. If you grew up in the town where the team played, that's another. But you name any program in the NCAA, and you can really connect dots between, okay, who was there in the 70s and the 80s, right? If you were talking about North Carolina, for example, North Carolina fans today, they can talk about the 80s with Michael Jordan and James Worthy and Sam Perkins, and then kids who grew up in the 90s can talk about, Vince Carter and Antoine Jameson, the championship team with Eric Montross and George Lynch in 1990s, right?
Yeah.
You get into the 2000s with Sean May and Ray Felton and Rashad McCants, team that won in 05. And it's just down the line, right? Kentucky can do that. Duke can do that. You have other teams that are more sporadic in their success, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes they'll go 15 years without having a good team. And this is just something, I'm not saying this doesn't happen in the NBA, because it does happen in the NBA, and I think there are plenty of fan bases where it does. But in college, I really think it's something that I love about the sport and about the fandom of the sport. So while you don't have players who are as technically proficient and as skilled on the whole, obviously, as the pros, the sense of fandom and rooting for a program and rooting for the players who come through that program and sort of living with the ups and downs of the program and remembering these individual seasons more aptly because they revolve around these single games late in the year is just something that I've always just really enjoyed and has been one of the sort of pleasures being a college sports fan.
Yeah. Well, the scope of the tournament is always fascinated me, and yeah, as you said, I'm not a big college basketball fan. We'll get into that later, but I do really enjoy the tournament. So many teams from so many, different parts of the country, and the talent disparity can be just staggering sometimes. But as you said, there's only one game, so anybody can win technically. Sometimes it seems like they have no chance, and they do get trounced. But there have been some huge upsets, and I do appreciate that part of it.
Yeah, and as we were talking about yesterday off air, I think there's a sense when people hear about Cinderella stories or underdogs. I think there are some misconceptions, especially with people who don't follow the sport week to week or month to month. But I think a film like the film Hoosiers might have sort of skewed the idea of the underdog. Now that's a movie about high school basketball in the state of Indiana, right? But it's also it's just like all these like gritty, scrappy white guys against this like more talented, athletic, all black team, right? And it's just sort of this narrative of, oh, these guys work hard, they believe in themselves, whatever, right?
Gritty.
And by along the same lines, I think when we think of Cinderella stories in the NCAA tournament in March Madness, a lot of people start to think about 14 or 13 seeds who have an upset, or maybe they even have two upsets and they make the Sweet 16, which is the second weekend of the tournament. I just don't. I guess I don't necessarily think those are the ones that stick with me, and those are interesting, but they usually are so short-lived because you just aren't going to normally have a 13 or 14 seed who's going to necessarily make this deep run in the tournament. And by the same token, you aren't going to have like an all-white team of Jimmy Chitwoods who's going to make this necessarily going to make this run. What I think of when I think of these sort of awesome, under-the-radar, maybe like underdog stories, are teams like the 2004 St. Joseph's team. St. Joseph's is a small Catholic school in Philadelphia, where you had a team that was in the Atlantic 10, which is a mid-major conference, right? Not one of the heavy hitters in terms of conferences.
Mm-hmm.
And this team went undefeated up until the conference tournament, and then entered the tournament at like 27-1, maybe. This team had Jameer Nelson and Delonte West, a three-point shooter by the name of, I believe, Pat Carroll. But this was a team of guys who just they weren't recruited because they were undersized and because they just didn't necessarily recruiting sometimes is strange. Sometimes it's a matter of like being undersized or being a little slow or being a little overweight or in the case of someone like the guy on the Clippers now, Louisville's Montrezl Harrell, who was a very good college player. He was ranked in the 90s in his recruiting class, and part of the reason he's from North Carolina. Part of the reason he was so unheralded then is because he grew up very poor, and he just didn't have the means and did not end up going through this AAU circuit and going to these places where recruits are seen and are become noticed, right? So sometimes it can be this fluky kind of thing, but in the case of St. Joseph's, this was a team that a lot of the sort of ACC and Big Ten and Big 12 snobby types in the middle of last decade, they just thought, oh, well, this is just a mid-major team. They're too small. And this team was awesome, okay? This team played their asses off. I don't think they started a guy who was taller than 6'7", but they were awesome. And if they had played in a series against most teams that year, they would have won. There was a huge controversy because they were a number one seed, and there's no real analogy for it. I suppose, in the NBA, because you just don't have mid majors. Like you always know who the 32 teams are going to be. But it was a big deal that this non-traditional power was a 1 seed in the tournament.
Well, it's interesting that they. Well, I was going to say it's interesting that they didn't start a guy over 6'7". It sounds like the Warriors lineup of death with with Draymond Green at center.
Right. Now in the case of the Warriors, that's because they they figure out, oh, well, we don't need to be defined by position. Positionless basketball can be fine. In this case, I would say it was probably more related to their recruiting, and that they literally just didn't have anyone taller than 6'7".
Well, I should also say that now the lineup of death has Kevin Durant as a small forward who's like almost 7 feet tall. But back in the day, like 3 years ago, Harrison Barnes was the small forward. It's kind of funny thinking about him being in the. Actually, he's had a good season. I'm not going to disparage Harrison Barnes. Anyway, continue, my friend.
Yeah. Well, no, but so I mean, they proved a lot. They didn't end up getting to the Final Four. They got to the Elite Eight, to the regional final. Lost to Oklahoma State on a shot by John Lucas III, the son of the NBA's better-known John Lucas, in 2004. But you mentioned Wichita State earlier. Wichita State had a team that made the Final Four as a 9 seed and lost to Louisville in the Final Four in 2013. The following year, they went 34-0. Entered the tournament undefeated. That team had Ron Baker, Cleanthony Early. The point guard is eluding me. Fred VanVleet. There you go.
Yeah, he's
right?
good.
Who I believe
he's a good backup for Raptors.
Yeah.
Solid.
And so this was just more like what is more enjoyable than watching a 15 seed, because it was like these teams, Gonzaga as well in recent years. Of course, Gonzaga now gets elite recruits, I would say, in a lot of cases. They made the championship game last year, but it's these non-traditional, non-blue blood programs, and they are going up against the North Carolinas of the world, the Kentuckys, the Dukes, the teams who have fans that say it is basically our birthright to have awesome college basketball teams every year. So
explain what the blue blood thing. Explain, what does that mean? I'm curious.
So the blue blood idea in college basketball is just this idea that you have a very established tradition in terms of success, and the fact that you have been to a bunch of Final Fours, you've won national championships, you have a large and oftentimes vocal, rabid fan base who has high expectations, right? So you talk about expectations in terms of like Kansas, North Carolina, UCLA, Duke. These are programs that most of them, blue blood comes with an air of like establishment and deep-rooted establishment, right? These are teams that they didn't just start getting good in the 1990s, like, for example, with all due respect to John Stockton, Gonzaga really as a program has flourished in the last 2 decades. They weren't necessarily as strong when John Stockton was there.
Well, so like
Kansas.
Okay. I was going to say
Kansas has a legacy that goes back to Wilt Chamberlain.
Oh,
right.
That's
North Carolina, you can trace it back to the 50s and then into the 80s with the players I talked about. Duke, you can sort of, it's more starts with Coach K, but they had some respectable and teams who made deep runs even before Krzyzewski got there in the 1980s.
Louisville Cardinals?
Kentucky. Louisville Cardinals would be on that list. Kentucky, I was going to say, has Dan Issel, right? And then you trace them to the 80s with Kenny Skywalker. Into the 90s with Antoine Walker and Ron Mercer and Tony Delk and Derek Anderson and that group. Louisville, I would say they have had a very
not as many NBA players.
Amount of success. Not as many NBA players, but if you look at the last 40 years in terms of their college success, it's been pretty remarkable, right? The 70s made a couple Final Fours, into the 80s with the Doctors of Dunk and Purvis Ellison. More recently, Louisville has had more NBA success in terms of players than they have maybe since I've been following or since I've been alive. You've got, Terry Rozier on the Celtics, Montrezl Harrell on the Clippers, Gorgie Jang on the Timberwolves.
He's really good.
And
he should be starting.
Donovan. Yeah,
Gorgie
Dang. Yeah,
it hurts me.
Yeah,
Hurts me to see him.
I think he probably could benefit from a change of scenery. But
Yeah.
most notably this year, of course, Donovan Mitchell, who has been a revelation on the Jazz. We can talk about Donovan Mitchell some other time.
Mitchell.
But
that guy's so good. Man.
Yeah, he's been remarkable in his rookie season out in Salt Lake City. But anyway, UCLA, of course, the most prominent of all, right? The 60s, they had Bill Walton and Lou Alcindor, who would become Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, right?
The great Bill Walton.
They just had this legacy of tons and tons of championships and Hall of Fame level basketball players.
Gaudy stats too.
Yeah, a guy considered to be the greatest coach of all time in the college ranks in John Wooden. Although I guess some people at this point would probably put Mike Krzyzewski up there in terms of the difference in eras and whatnot. But this stuff all factors into how you classify a blue blood, right? Yeah. Now you contrast that with some of the power conference teams who don't have as much success and aren't considered blue bloods. This year in college basketball, as an example, two programs that come to mind that would fit that bill would be Arizona State, a team that is coached by Bobby Hurley of Duke fame.
I remember Bobby.
And yeah, they haven't won a tournament game since James Harden was there in 2009, and they haven't made a deep tournament run since the 90s.
Yeah.
Auburn University, school in the SEC in Alabama, is most famous for being the alma mater of Charles Barkley in the 80s. They haven't won a tournament game in March since 2003, right? But they were a 1 seed in like 1999, and so they have had sort of these flashes of success, but they are usually, again, pretty ephemeral. It's like one good season and that's it, right? You have programs like that. Washington in 2005 was a 1 seed. They had Brandon Roy and Nate Robinson, and they never got back there, right? They never got back there.
Yeah.
Now they were churning out really good talent, Terrence Ross and
Fultz, right?
Yeah, Markel Fultz. There's one or two other guys around Terrence Ross that I'm forgetting.
I can't help you.
But anyway, yeah. But the guy on the Spurs that you were just mentioning on Twitter, DeJounte Murray.
That guy's good, man. 7 foot wingspan, 6'5", point guard.
Yeah, I believe that's a Washington. I think he's a Washington guy as well, isn't he? Anyway, so those programs are programs that haven't had success in a long time.
Yeah, he is.
And they are sort of having, by their standards, very solid years. So their fan bases are re-energized after sort of years of being dormant as powerhouses. Conversely, you have programs that used to be powers and are having to kind of wait it out, right? Indiana is sort of having to reload and rebuild with Archie Miller, this new coach, and is a program, this sort of classic example of a program that is looking back on its achievements in the 70s and 80s and then looking into the present day, and the fans are saying to themselves, why can't we be as good as we were in the 70s or 80s? There's no reason we can't be a blue blood again.
Yeah.
I guess in their case it would be a red blood. They wouldn't want to be referred to as blue blood. But you get the idea, right?
That's what I'm saying. Like, do the cards refer to themselves as the red bloods?
Yeah. I mean, well,
Big Red.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we should.
I know it's just a term. I know it's just a term. I know.
The true blue bloods don't even really. They think Louisville is like maybe a notch below historically.
Yeah.
And if you look at number of Final Fours and championships, there is some truth in that. But you also look at the fact that, for example, if you're
gonna never admit that, Sam, because you're a diehard Cardinals fan. So you're
no. But I do admit that. I admit that Kentucky has a more established tradition in basketball than Louisville does. There's no question about that.
It's hard.
I would
like
add
hearing
though.
that, but yeah.
Well,
you're
but
probably right.
Hold on.
You're probably
Hold
right.
on a second though. Let me offer a caveat to that.
Okay.
4 of Kentucky's 8 national titles happened in the year 1958 or prior. They won in 1948, 1949, 1951, and 1958, right?
Yeah.
Ben, I got some news for you. College basketball was slightly different in the 40s and 50s. There were like a couple things, if I could only put my finger on it.
Yeah.
Some things that were a little different about the game, and if I watched grainy video, maybe if I really tried really hard, I could probably figure out, what those things were. I can't quite put my finger on what was totally different about basketball in the 40s and 50s with Adolph Rupp.
Good old Adolph.
He would take off his Klan hood and put his suit on to coach the Cats. But no.
I should also explain to anybody who doesn't know that where we're from, Kentucky, there is no professional basketball team. There are 2 powerhouse college programs, University of Kentucky and University of Louisville, and they are bitter rivals. So Sam and I, to a much lesser degree, are Cardinals fans, and we just don't like the Wildcats. Don't like UK, and we got friends who are UK fans as well. But
and we like them. I don't like a lot of the fans.
I hate them all.
The friends,
no, I'm joking.
The friends that I have who are UK fans, I have no problem with. Those are the reasonable ones.
Yeah.
You know, U of L. There are also Louisville fans who are not at all reasonable. The players, a lot of the players who come through the Kentucky program, especially in the last 20 years, I really like a lot of the players actually.
Yeah.
And it's hard and frustrating for them to be on a team that is so tied to that fan base's success. Because even though I might like watching De'Aaron Fox play for Kentucky, or I might like watching, John Wall or, Carl Anthony Towns play for Kentucky, I know that their success at Kentucky wearing blue and white is linked directly to these fans being happy.
Yeah.
And it's like that part is sometimes is tough to grapple with. But no, I mean, look, I think the players, a lot of the players who've come through there have been really good guys and talented players, and I have nothing against necessarily the rosters themselves. Generally, there are some players in particular that I don't really like on some of the teams. But
there's so many Wildcats in the NBA now. It's crazy. Like there was a time.
It's an embarrassment of riches.
Like,
and
I'm a Suns fan. And remember they had Bledsoe. They had Brandon Knight, Devin Booker, and Archie. What's his last name? Archie Goodwin. All on the same team, all guards. It was just an embarrassment. They have an embarrassment of talent.
No, I know, and that is something that benefits the team in the form of making 4 Final Fours in 5 years. That would be 2011 through 2015. They made 4 Final Fours in 5 years. There is an element, and I mean, I know this isn't really me speculating. I know this to be true.
Yeah.
There is an element of frustration in the Kentucky fan base because you look at how well and how successful these teams have, these players have gone on to be as professional players.
Yeah.
And thus far, they have 1 title to show for it.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that they can't win more titles in the future, but you look at some of the rosters that John Calipari, the coach of the UK men's team, some of the rosters that he has compiled, and some of the teams that he's had, and you look at the teams that they've lost to in the NCAA tournament, and when you have the benefit of hindsight, and especially when you have the benefit of NBA careers and stats, you look at it and you're like, how the hell did he have that team and not beat this other team?
Well, yeah, like Devin Booker was his sixth man.
Oh yeah,
for a while, for like 1 year. I mean, it's crazy to wrap your head around. And he went late. He was in the lottery, but I don't think he was drafted high. I'm gonna check right now. It's just
and look, college basketball is not always
13th pick. He was a 13th pick.
Talent is crucial to a level, and then beyond that, it's about how the pieces fit.
Yeah.
And the Kentucky team you're referencing, which was the team that Devin Booker was on for 1 year, which was the team that went 38-0 and then lost to Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Frank the Tank, team led by Frank Kaminsky and Sam Decker and Nigel Hayes.
Sam Decker and Frank Kaminsky beat that team.
But Ben, here's the thing: if you ask a lot of college basketball fans whether they were stunned by that result, a lot of them would say no.
Yeah.
And the reason is because Wisconsin had pieces that fit what it tried to do offensively perfectly, and the way that it played perfectly. And Kentucky had a treasure trove of talent on that team, right? They had Karl Anthony Towns, they had Devin Booker, they had the Harrison twins as sophomores. They had Trey Lyles, who I believe he's on the Nuggets now, right? I think. Who else did they have? They had Tyler Ulis, right? Another guy who has been on the Suns that we didn't mention. But there's only 5 guys who can play on the court at the same time, right? And there's only one basketball. And, I don't know if anybody would have figured out how to make those pieces fit, especially when so many of them were freshmen and sophomores. But John Calipari sure as hell did not know how to do it when he had to play a team that was as experienced and as organized as Wisconsin. So like I look at that and it seems kind of, in retrospect, when you look at averages in the NBA, you look at how Devin Booker is a star, Karl Anthony Towns is a star. Like in retrospect, on one hand, it seems sort of shocking, and on the other, I could tell you that year that I picked Wisconsin to win a tournament because that team was full of juniors and seniors, and they had pieces that fit, and they were a bad matchup for that team. So I think it can be interesting and enjoyable to go back and look in hindsight at how good teams were, but it's always important to see to consider in the moment how well those pieces fit. The 2012 Kentucky team that won the title, which was a machine, I mean, there was really never any doubt to most people who followed the sport that they were going to win. That was the team that had Anthony Davis as a freshman. They had Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. They had Darius Miller and Deron Lamb, who I believe probably has not had. They had Marcus Teague. That was a team where it was just like all the pieces in terms of having a post presence, having guards who knew how to distribute the ball, having really good committed defensive players. The pieces just all worked together on that team.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Anthony Davis is just
we've talked enough about Kentucky. He's great. But I've reached my quota for talking about Kentucky on this podcast. So I'm going to move on.
Well, go ahead.
But,
go ahead. I think I know where you're going, so go ahead.
Well, I want to talk about a guy who was recruited by Kentucky, ended up spurning them for the Crimson and Cream of Oklahoma.
Delicious.
A school that, interestingly enough, has had several National Player of the Year candidates in the last decade. They've had
Blake Griffin.
Blake Griffin in 2009. They had Buddy Hield in 2016. Right. And this year, almost assuredly, they have the National Player of the Year in a freshman point guard named Trae Young.
Oh.
Now, Ben, Trae Young was a known and a fairly hyped recruit, but he wasn't top of his recruiting class. He's listed at 6'2", 180. I think I saw in one top 100 for the incoming class, the class of the high school graduating class of 2017. He was ranked like 20th, right? Which is good. But it's not like it's not like number 1 or number 2 the way that Anthony Davis or Jahlil Okafor or some of these other just sort of, well, I guess Jahlil Okafor ended up not being a can't-miss prospect. But you know what I mean. Like, It's not people who – this guy who just committed to Duke, Zion Williamson. This is a guy who they've been making mixtapes with him
I've seen
since
some
he was
of those.
a freshman.
By the way, I think Okafor
Uh-huh.
might still have a decent NBA career. I'm not – he's really out of shape right now, supposedly, but I think he could be good in the NBA.
Okay,
He's shown that he can be an offensive force. Defensively,
so you're setting up camp on Okafor Island.
I am to pull a page out of Zach Lowe's book, I guess. I'm setting up camp. I think he doesn't fit today's NBA. It's true, but if he can get in great shape and get up and down the floor with some degree of pace, I think he can be kind of a Clint Capella with an array. He has an arsenal of post moves that are quite advanced for his age. And I don't know. I'm still on that island, and I will remain there. I will remain there.
Listen, I haven't watched him enough in the pros to give you a credible opinion. So
he can score in bunches. He really can score. Like that's one thing I think that is interesting about him. And he's got some nice footwork and post moves. Not Kevin McHale-esque, but like a homeless man's Kevin McHale, perhaps, if you will.
I think that nickname could stick. Homeless Kevin McHale. Maybe a shirt with that on it. Homeless Kevin McHale.
Homeless Kevin McHale. Like
could actually be a
picture of his face.
A good podcast name.
Yeah. The Homeless Kevin McHale.
The Homeless Kevin McHale podcast. No, but so back to Trae Young. So like people thought he was good, but nobody who follows the recruiting ranks or follows the college game thought that he was going to be this good this quickly. So this is a guy, Ben, who you look at his stat line and people just don't do college basketball players they simply do not do what he has been doing. Now I hesitate to say as a freshman because in the last few years there have been so many good freshmen and so many freshmen who come in and are frankly pretty dominant right away that I don't really think it's a big deal. It's not as big of a deal as it might have once been that he is a first year player. But the fact that he's 6'2", 180, the common refrain when you hear him discussed in the first 3 months or so of this season is that he is a very similar player. Some would even say like a carbon copy of Steph Curry. I would love to be able to give you a slightly contrarian opinion to that, Ben. But when you watch him play, I think it's pretty hard to deny that you're watching someone who has himself watched a ton of Steph Curry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm looking at his stats right now. I'm just gonna say one little thing. He's taking more threes per game than he's taking twos. He's taking 9.4 2-pointers compared to 10.5 3-pointers. So that's well, what's the word? Curry-esque. I don't know what that is. Curry-ish, but it's kind of Curryan. Now, unfortunately, I cannot find how many 3-pointers per game Steph shot in college. But he shot a lot.
Yeah,
you can say that much.
He shot a lot. Let's see. I can actually probably pull this up if you give me a second.
Yeah, I'll give you a second. I'm looking at
Let's see. 3-point field goal attempts. in a single season since 1986 and 87. In 2000, the 07-08 year, which was the year that Curry took Davidson to the Elite Eight, he had 369 field goal, 3-point field goal attempts.
That's a lot.
The following year, as a senior, he has 336. I will just say, just as a brief aside here, I remember watching Davidson make that tournament run. I believe they were a 10 seed. They beat Gonzaga in the first round. They beat a Georgetown team that had won the Big East, and they definitely had Roy Hibbert. And I think, let me look this up. I think maybe they also still had Jeff Green, who has been the butt of a lot of NBA jokes, I know. But, no, excuse me, Jeff Green had left the year before. Jeff Green was on the Final Four team in 07. Yeah. But Jeff Green was an awesome college player at Georgetown, right? But this team had Roy Hibbert. Davidson beat them. They go into the Sweet 16. They play a Wisconsin team that I believe was I think they were a 3 seed. They played in the Lions arena, the Detroit Lions stadium. Yeah, here we go. Wisconsin was a 3 seed, and this game, I remember it was on a no, it's Ford Field. Yeah,
oh, yeah.
Not the Silverdome.
They played in Silverdome. Oh, but really quickly, Steph Curry took 10.25 threes per game.
Oh, right.
07,
the per game is helpful too. Yeah, okay, yeah.
So that's if you look at that, it's very similar to Trae Young. In fact, oh my goodness, so Trae Young's taking 10.5 and Curry's taking 10.25. Very similar in that regard.
Very similar. I remember watching Curry play though, and this would have been March of 08, so he would have been 19 years old, just shy of his 20th birthday. And Davidson won this game by 17 points. I'm looking this up right now. Let me look up and see what he did. But then in that game, Curry, I just had never really seen anyone do that in a game. I mean, he was doing exactly what he does in the NBA, and he had
3-point bomber.
He had this insane handle. He was shooting from 30 feet just with no
regard for human life.
Right between
the eyes.
Yeah.
By the way, Curry,
a cold-blooded deuce, which I think is a weird term, if I'm being honest. Kevin Harlan.
That sounds really disgusting.
He had 33 points in that game. He was 6 of 11 from 3. But Ben, if you had told me at that moment, if you told me that at that moment that Steph Curry was going to be able to do that in the NBA, I would have thought you were out of your mind.
Yeah.
Because this just looked like a 6'2" guy who'd never lifted weights in his life, and he just caught off guard this Big Ten team. Yeah. They then came within one basket of reaching the Final Four. They lost to eventual national champion Kansas, which was a team that had Mario Chalmers, and Darrell Arthur, Cole Aldrich, the low block god, Cole Aldrich.
I love Cole Aldrich.
And
per minute master in the NBA. The guy puts up so many stats and
Curry actually famously passed up the last shot in that game that was a chance to, I believe, I don't know. Let me see if they lost. Did they lose? Sorry, this is.
No, that's okay. Well, while you're looking that up,
they lost by 2. Yeah, and so they had a 3 to win. They had that 3 to win. Curry passed the ball because he was double teamed to like another guy in Davidson who I think is probably selling insurance now or whatever. And Curry passed up the final shot to go to the Final Four. But at that moment, Simmons, Curry was I don't know, what would he have been? Maybe a sophomore or a junior, but he was awesome. And
19.
The Warriors are a team that I think Steph and Draymond in particular are just players who they're such unusual players, and their styles are so rooted in what often constitutes a good college player that I think that is why a lot of college basketball fans find themselves. And I could be wrong on this. This is just a personal opinion. I think this is why a lot of college basketball fans gravitate to the Warriors, because they don't see technically proficient players that the way that the NBA often produces players who are immensely talented. Don't get me wrong, but they're often players whose games peak when they are pros. Now, I think that's certainly true of Curry and Draymond as well, but I think you could also argue that the way that their games are and the way that they have evolved are games that really just resonate with college basketball fans. Draymond Green, as a 4-year player at Michigan State, was very much a typical Tom Izzo player at Michigan State.
Yeah.
You know, a guy who does a lot of things. He was 6'7", 6'8". He came in, he was a little overweight. Izzo is known for having his players make these dramatic improvements from year 1 to year 2 or 3 or 4. Nobody, I think, really very few, if any people, other than the people in Draymond Green's family, thought that he was going to be this good. But that is a player who, the way that he does a little bit of everything, a college fan will watch that and be like, that's a Michigan State player. That's a guy who is often there are 50 Draymond Greens each year in college basketball, and none of them go on to be pro Draymond Green. But there are you know, and I don't mean this in terms of a one-for-one combo, but there are a bunch of guys who kind of play like Steph Curry. A lot of them are at small schools, and they're just gunners. And they don't end up being Steph Curry, right? But that is, I think, why that team and those particular players have hit a chord with college fans, just because there's a college element and a sort of there's an improvisational, excuse me, easy for me to say, right?
Improv.
Yeah, I have trouble speaking sometimes. I'm sorry.
Hey,
there's
join
an
the club.
improvisational element to their game that just is unusual in some ways for the league, for the NBA. And it exists more in college. Now, oftentimes it's not a good thing. It can result in sloppy and weird and poor play. But when it doesn't result in that, it goes right. You know, it can be beautiful. But back to Trae Young. Simmons, Trae Young is ahead. Listen, we don't know how good Trae Young is going to end up being, but Trae Young is ahead of Steph Curry at this point in his college career. I don't think there's any question about that. He's currently averaging 30.3 points a game. Okay,
goodness,
for the season.
Yeah,
I'm looking on our trusted basketballreference.com here.
Yeah, right there with
since the 85-86 season, so that's 32 years ago. 10 players over 32 seasons where you have 300 plus teams a season. So that's what? Let's go to the calculator here.
30 seasons times 300?
Yeah. I was going to do 32. I think it's about 320. So 32 times 320 is 10,240. All right. So if you just take 10,240 teams over that stretch of time, there are 10 guys who have averaged 30 points or more in college basketball games. Now, we should note, of course, that college games are shorter than an NBA. NBA has 4 12-minute quarters. College has 2 20-minute halves. Oftentimes, I don't think there's that much of a difference in minutes per game, just because a lot of these college dudes are playing 37 or 38 minutes.
Yeah,
Trae's
playing 35, 34
right,
minutes,
which is
34 minutes.
I mean, that's pretty on par with what Steph and Durant play, right?
Yeah.
LeBron probably plays a little more, but I mean, most guys are at this point anyway. Coaches have figured out how to rest them. But anyway, in this top 10, players you would know as an NBA guy. And frankly, players that I would know, because some of these college guys I don't really know. But like 1988-89, Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, who became Chris Jackson, averaged 30.16 at LSU.
Steph Curry-esque he was.
Yeah, 93-94, Glenn Robinson, 30.29, the big dog at Purdue, 93-94.
Oh yeah.
They were a 1 seed that year, I believe, and on track this year to be a 1 seed again, probably for the first time since that Glenn Robinson team. The number one guy since 85-86 is Percy Hawkins. He averaged 36.29 points a game at Bradley, a school in I believe Bradley's in Illinois, I think, Peoria.
It's a blast from the past.
Anyway, so 10 guys, right? Most of them, the majority of whom either didn't play in the NBA or had who had pretty anonymous NBA careers. This is a freshman, 6'2", 180-pound guy who is poised to join elite company. He's also averaging 9.7 assists a game, which would put him in the top 10 since 85-86 for assists for anyone in the 80s since 85-86 in terms of guards or any player for assists per game. The same player holds two of the top 3 seasons in 87-88 and then before that in 86-87. Do you want to take a guess at who that was? You would know who this. You would have heard of this guy.
The same player.
Sorry, the leader all time for assists in college, since 85-86 was a guy who in 87 and 88, those back-to-back years, one year he averaged 13.3 assists a game. The next year he averaged 10.74. Do you want to take a guess who that was?
Who was it? Hold on. What are the years again? 85 and 86?
86-87 and 87-88.
Holy crap! Hold on, just give me a second here. I gotta go for it here. I just gotta go for it. Who could it be? Oh God, I'm drawing a complete blank. Is it I was gonna say J Kidd, but that's well before J Kidd, and he only played 1 year.
It's a little before Jason Kidd, yeah.
Yeah. Is it man? Is it Mark Price?
Mark Price is a good guess. It is Avery Johnson. Yeah.
I had no idea. Oh my God.
Yeah, Avery Johnson at Southern University, which is a school in HBCU in Baton Rouge.
The little general. Avery Johnson.
Avery, now the coach at Alabama.
Really?
University of Alabama. Yeah. He's got a really good recruit who is in the conversation to be a lottery pick, a guy named Colin Sexton. So he's been
he's perfect for college. Avery Johnson.
Yeah, and he had success as a pro coach as well. He had that. He was the coach of those Mavs teams who went to the finals, and then that team who got knocked out by the Warriors. Was right?
Yeah,
was he not?
I think he was.
Yeah. Anyway, so Trae Young is in elite company in both of those regards in terms of points and assists. If you get into the advanced stats, which I won't claim to be an expert on, something called offensive box plus minus, he is number 1 in the country at 13.8. The next guy is 10.7. Looking at offensive box plus minus since 2010-11 when it started being recorded as a stat, that would be the best since that year. Other guys in the top 10, just for reference, are Buddy Hield, had 10.32 in that category in 2015-16. Damian Lillard had 10.27 in that category in 11-12. Kemba Walker the previous year, 10-11, had 10.24. Jimmer Fredette, 10.20 in 2010-11. I don't claim to know what this stat means.
Well,
by the way,
I'll go ahead and say what it means. I'm not an expert either, but I'm just going to read what it says. Offensive box plus minus, a box score estimate of the offensive points per 100 possessions a player contributed above a league average player translated to an average team. Wow. Well, he also has a usage of 39%, which I feel like is astronomical.
It's a 39% usage. Let me see. I can pull this up. Since the 09-10 season, so 8 years ago, that would currently be ranked number either, depending on the decimal point, either number 1 or number 2.
Man.
Of any player in the last 8 years in college.
That is wild. And he also that's crazy. And something I've been kind of paying attention to more is true shooting percentage.
Correct.
And
Explain what that is to the
okay,
people.
a true shooting percentage, a measure of shooting efficiency that takes into account 2-point field goals, 3-point field goals, and free throws. He is shooting 61.7% true shooting percentage. That's like exceptional, right?
Yeah. It's very good.
I mean, I don't think I was looking it up earlier.
I'm looking at true shooting percentage since the 85-86 season. You want to guess who number one on the list is?
Steve Nash.
Very close.
He had a high one. He had a really high one. I know. Who is it? Steph?
Steve Kerr.
Steve Kerr! The dead-eye shooter. Steve Kerr was such a dead-eye.
87-88, an Arizona player, played for University of Arizona with, I believe, with Sean Elliott.
Yeah.
His true shooting percentage was .7816.
Man.
70.
So,
I guess that's easier to say. 78.16, whatever.
Well, he probably wasn't handling the shot volume that Trae Young is handling. Like Trae Young, okay, I gotta say when you brought up Trae Young, I admittedly don't really follow the college game very closely.
Yep.
Okay, but
Yep.
when I find a player that puts up stats like this young man, this gentleman, I zero in and I start to follow.
That's your Hubie Brown.
This gentleman,
Brown.
this young man,
the young man. He fronts in the post now. The player,
I love listening. Hubie is such a joy to listen to. I mean, he is just he's
I go back and forth between enjoying him and feeling like I'm being lectured.
Yeah, he's just fun. It's funny how he talks about stats too. He's like, well, he also puts up. He's also giving you 1 steal a game, and he's shooting the ball 87% from free throw. He's kind of like. He's old school with his stats, which I like. I like the old school stats guys. He doesn't talk about the advanced stuff. But I'm looking at Trae Young's game log, Sam.
Yep, as am I.
The man. Okay, so recently he kind of dialed back to 3-point attempts. He said he needed to kind of get a hold of himself, manage his shots. He only took 9 shots against Kansas. Hit 7
I was going to say, I want
efficient.
to talk about that game.
Yeah, we will. But first, I just want to talk about how he took 20 threes against Oklahoma State.
Right.
In an overtime game. All right? The man took 20 threes. He's going to fit into the NBA fire away mentality from beyond the arc just fine.
He was 14 of 39. Obviously, in the, to be clear,
overtime game, but still.
Overtime game, so a 10 more additional minutes than a normal game. But he was 14 of 39 from the field.
Not a great percentage.
Not great. I don't even think the term green light does that justice, because green light presupposes that there is a red light. I think that's no light at all and no stop sign, and the speed limit is 120. I think that's what that kind of mentality is.
The truth is about, and by the way, Trae Young, what do you think his nickname's going to be? I mean, the guy just shoots trays like a demon, so he's going to be. It's perfect for him. But he shoots actually a decent percentage from just total field goals, 45.1.
No, he does.
It's not that bad for a gunner, not a gunner, but like a hoister.
No, it's not. It's not at all.
Volume shooter.
If only he were from California, you could play off of the Californian sketch on SNL with Trae Young. Get out of here, Devin. If only his name was Devin. But that can be Devin Booker. That can be for Devin Booker. Although I don't think he's from California either. Anyway, I'm talking nonsense.
Well, no. Hey, that's this whole podcast is talking nonsense. Let's be real. But I mean, the guy is shooting. So he's taking 10. We already talked about it. He's taking 10.5 threes a game. He's making 4.2 of them for an even 40.0% from three. Steph, that year we were talking about, where
Yep.
Steph took 10.25 threes, he was making 43.9%. So, I
Mhm.
mean, Steph is a dead eye. He's like a once in a generation, maybe once in a
What? I'm
lifetime
sorry. What did
shooter.
you say? Trey's. What is Trey's percentage?
Trey's percentage is 40% even.
Yeah. Okay. Mhm.
Steph, that year we were referencing, was 43.9%. So
Right.
I mean, but there's still I still think, sometimes comparisons can be a little clunky and
They can
too
be.
too
Yeah.
too easy. But I think it's a reasonable comparison. I mean, he's
Well.
dishing more assists out, and he has more
Yeah.
usage. But I don't know if he does
It,
have more usage actually. That might
well.
not be
Well.
true.
In defense of Trey, not in defense, but to sort of add to how impressive this has been.
Mm,
You know, Steph Curry did not. I mean, he was known because he was Del Curry's son, obviously,
yeah.
but he did not really enter the national spotlight as a college player until that 2008 tournament that I mentioned,
Yeah.
where he just was ripping teams apart.
Mm,
I would also add that he played in the Southern Conference, which is a small conference for Davidson.
yeah.
Trae Young is playing in what is the the agreed upon
Mm,
strongest conference pound for pound this year in the NCAA and the Big 12.
that's a good
He's
point.
got guys like LeBron and Steph himself shouting him out on
Yeah.
Instagram or Twitter or whatever, or in interviews.
Yeah.
So there is a much bigger spotlight related to the fact that this is 2018 instead of '08, and also related to the fact that they play in a bigger conference. There's a much bigger spotlight on Trae Young than there ever was really on Steph Curry.
Yeah,
As a
except
college player.
except when he went to the March Madness, and then like that run that you described when
Right.
it's so much
Right.
he got so much play. Then I even remember seeing an interview with him where he talked about LeBron invited him over to his house to play to
Exactly.
bowl in his basement at his bowling alley.
Yeah.
Like LeBron had a bowling alley in his basement, so he hung out
Yeah.
with LeBron.
Yeah. No, and
Little
listen,
did he know that they would be talking shit to each
mortal
other
enemies.
in the NBA
Yeah.
Finals, and LeBron would be acting like he was some tough guy all of a sudden.
Yeah.
While he blocked
Right.
Steph. Although that he kind of did mentally best them in that Finals, I will say. When
He
the
did,
Cavs
but
won.
it look, I mean, that finals we could you could have a whole that could be its own podcast.
It will.
It
will.
You know,
Don't worry.
the
Everything.
Met shots from Draymond.
Listen, everything will be its own podcast.
Everything
right?
is a podcast.
Everything is content, Sam. Okay.
Every conversation is an unrecorded podcast. If you really
Exactly.
think about
Exactly.
It.
I'm just gonna record myself making a sandwich and eating it, and put it and upload it onto internet, and it's gonna
maybe the commentary.
Yeah.
While you make it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. A little director's commentary while I make a sandwich.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all content, Sam. It's all being streamed.
You can talk
all
about
live.
You can talk about how you improved, which is what directors love to do on that stuff. This was mostly just improv.
Yeah.
We really didn't have a script. We just let the actors kind of go and explore.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that Ben Affleck DVD commentary thing on YouTube of Armageddon, where he's like
No.
he's watching some scene and just making fun of the movie the whole time? Like he's in the movie, but he's watching it and just ripping it the whole time. It went viral a little while ago. It's
I'll have to watch that.
absolutely hilarious.
I will check that out. I will throw back at you the commentary that Noel Gallagher does on Oasis videos from the 90s, which is the same kind of thing. Noel Gallagher, lead guitarist and one half of the Oasis duo of brothers that
when we were getting high.
There you
Someday
go.
you will find me.
All right, that's all I got.
I thought Liam was on the podcast for a second.
That was a song
that
a certain mutual friend of ours, Mr. Mike O, we'll call him. That's his name now. Mike O. Not my cousin, the other Mike O. We would listen to that. That was like basically on a playlist that we listened to, I think, for 50 days straight in college, while taking huge throat sizzle. What am I talking about? We would just be taking these huge bong rips and listening to this is horrible. It wasn't a horrible playlist, but it was just the same songs every day.
Right.
We would just put it on after that first bong rip, and man alive, that Champagne Supernova.
Did Marco Killingsworth ever come over and hang out with you guys?
We weren't that cool,
By the way,
man. We were not that cool.
I ride for those first two Oasis albums. Those are great albums. But anyway,
I gotta re-examine them. You
should check out that commentary because it's hilarious. Because he's just ripping apart his own videos and talking about how awful they are. It's great. Anyway, getting back to where we were, Trae Young, I didn't really watch much of him in the non-conference, I will admit. It did catch my eye when he hit 43 points against Oregon in that Phil Knight tournament out in the state of Oregon, out where you are. That tournament, I believe, was held in Portland, where the Blazers play.
Yep.
He then had
Moda Center.
26 points and 22 assists against Northwestern State, which is just an insane stat line.
But they beat that team 105-68, but still, 22
assists is
it's unreal.
That is that gets this podcast stamp of approval.
Yes.
In terms of gaudiness.
Kidding
me? 43 points against TCU in overtime.
Yeah.
48 points in the game we mentioned last weekend against Oklahoma State, where maybe he wasn't the most efficient. Last night, though, and I don't know if you had the chance to watch this game at all, but they beat number 5 Kansas last night in a big home win for Oklahoma. Trae Young, clearly the focus of Kansas's defensive game plan. For the most part, they put a senior guard named Devontae Graham on Trae Young, and it was clear that the entire the crux of Kansas's game plan last night was do not let this guy score 40 on us, right? I was incredibly just impressed by how well Trae adjusted to the game plan. He ended up with a remarkably efficient game, 7 of 9 from the field, 2 of 3 from three-pointers, 10 of 12 from the free throw line, 9 assists, 4 rebounds. This is for an 18-year-old, 6'2", 180-pound guy. We've talked about the comparison to Curry now at length and how he everything relating from the dribble to the low release on his shot to the way that he just in transition pulls up from 30 feet is very similar to Steph.
Yeah.
I think what really struck me last night, though, Ben, was how good of a passer he is and how good his court vision is when he wants to be a pass-first guy. I mean, these are not just passes where you penetrate in and you drop the ball down to a guy for a layup or a dunk, although he did have, I think, maybe a couple of those. But his ability at his age to see the entire floor, especially in the half court, is just not. I mean, I guess it's what some people, maybe scouts, call his feel, right? It's just like his sense of space and where other players are and where there is an open man. It's just, I mean, it's awesome. It's like it really is like
Nash-esque.
It's Nash-esque. I mean, I'm thinking more.
Kid.
I'm thinking more in the moment, but I guess it looks a lot like Chris Paul. Like the way he is able to pass, it looks like Chris Paul looked as a freshman and a sophomore at Wake Forest, where another guy that came in as a guard, by the way, and was immediately good at Wake.
And smaller guy too.
And
although,
smaller, but I mean,
Trae Young's 6'2", so he's not like.
He's 6'2", but I'm going to tell you this. I don't think he's 6'2".
Yeah. I mean, Steve Nash is listed as 6'3", and there's no way he's 6'3".
I think if you watch a highlight video or watch some footage of him maybe today, and you tell me if I'm wrong, but I think Trae Young being listed at 6'2" is a little bit like Barkley being 6'8" or something, right? It's not really accurate.
I agree. I'm looking at the schedule right now. I'm going to start watching. I'm going to start.
Yeah.
Because it looks like a game against Alabama. I'm kind of pissed that I didn't watch the game against Kansas. I watched the highlights, but I want to see. I guess they face off against Kansas February 19th, so I'll watch that one for sure. I'll watch. Right. I'm going to watch as many as I can because he's going to be gone after this year, and it's just going to be fun to watch him.
Almost definitely going to be a top 5 pick, wouldn't you say?
I mean, I don't. Yeah. Let's see.
And look,
who's going to have the number 1 pick? Orlando, I think, right now is slated, but that's not definite. But they have the best chance, I think, to get the number 1 pick. They already have a point guard, but I'm sure they can part with Elfrid Payton pretty easily. He's been a little up and down.
I don't think they'd lose any sleep over that.
Yeah, they wouldn't. But I do like Elfrid. But yeah, you're right. I mean, they're gonna go with the hot name,
right?
Trae Young, and as they probably should.
and so it's important to note, though, right? He is just 18. So while what he has done up to this point, or 19, or however old he is, while it's been impressive, it's not a foregone conclusion that he's going to be as good as Steph Curry.
Yeah, I mean he's not like a definite prospect, like going to be an all-time great like LaMelo Ball, for instance, right?
for like LaMelo Ball, right? But I mean, one thing that any college fan will tell you, a college fan first, NBA fan second. One thing that you can ask anyone and they will tell you is everyone has a list of guys that they have been just dead wrong on in terms of how their games would translate to the NBA.
Yeah.
Both in terms of guys they thought were going to be great and weren't, and vice versa. So I have learned never to assume how well a player's game will translate, because there's just, I mean, not to say I haven't seen some guys and been like, all right, this guy's going to be great in the NBA, but there's a lot of guys that I've just been wrong on, and I've just thought, okay, well, this is going to translate, and it didn't at all. So
yeah, I thought Marco Killingsworth would be good.
Yeah, he was a lefty, wasn't he?
Yeah, I mean he had some great games. He seemed versatile. The only thing with him though, he was undersized and he wasn't terribly athletic, so I think he was kind of doomed.
But other than that,
he was 6'8", I think, maybe even shorter, and he was a little hefty. But
kind of like almost like Chuck Hayes, maybe a little bit.
Yeah, except he had a shot. He could shoot from the outside.
Right. He
hit a 3-point shot in college. But so like Sam, okay, let me ask you something. Serious question, okay? Who are you gonna take for the rest of their career?
Oh God.
Trae Young or LaMelo Ball?
Oh God, that's a tough.
But like, what do you really think about LaMelo Ball? Like, I don't
have an opinion. I'm so tired. I just want them to go away.
Yeah, I know. I agree with you completely. But it's just funny, like watching him play. He pulls up from so far. He's like a I wouldn't even say homeless man, Steph Curry. He's like what's below home? Like he's just a sewer dwelling Steph Curry, like living underneath the streets, like in the sewer.
Right.
You know, like an old SNL sketch with Tracy Morgan. You know, the guy.
Yeah, where he's singing about pigeons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a doo-doo pie.
Well, no, I mean, look.
Yeah, that skit is so funny. Oh God.
Yeah. I think ESPN sent that reporter Jeff Goodman over to Lithuania to cover them, and it's just it reminds me a lot of the post-college coverage of Tebow, where it's like there's just nothing there but ratings and hype and clicks, and people see that
it's entertaining.
They want to see. Well, it's entertaining
kind
to a
of
point, and then it's like it's not that entertaining to me anymore.
It's entertaining in like a guilty reality show way, you know. It's
a lot of people do find it. I personally find Kenan Thompson's LeVar Ball impression a lot more entertaining than LeVar Ball himself. But you know, it's just there's nothing there. I don't really care about LaMelo Ball. I feel kind of bad for Lonzo that he is all caught up.
Speaking of court vision.
Garbage.
That guy definitely has court vision, Lonzo.
He definitely does. You know, how well I mean, he really needs to learn how to like defend and shoot, right?
Yeah.
Those are two things that he really is struggling at. But he's also young, so we'll see. But just,
I mean,
the less
I think he can defend pretty well when he really concentrates in it. I don't know if he's maybe he's not the best on-ball defender, but I think I'm already seeing some pretty good off-the-ball defense, and he's getting the stats. So maybe that's a little bit of a smoke screen. So he'll get like, a couple steals here and a couple blocks there. He even had a game where he had, I think, like 5 steals and 2 blocks in the game. But I don't think he is a great on the ball defender. But as I said, I think he's a good help defender, and he looks big out there for a point guard.
He does. I mean, I've seen him a couple times where it seems like a physical, bigger defender guarding him. He has a lot of issues. It's like when someone is up in his face, it looks like he's never really had to deal with that.
For sure.
That doesn't mean he won't be able to deal with it in the future. But his worst enemy right now, and this is not an original take, but his worst enemy right now is his family.
Yeah,
like
it's true.
His dad trying to undermine Luke Walton.
It's
and,
so
stupid. Talking shit about Luke Walton. Like, what is he doing?
So short-sighted.
And at some point, I'm just tired of listening to it. All of that said, I will conservatively take Trae Young for the rest of his career over LaMelo Ball.
What about Trae Young versus Lonzo? What do you think about that?
Oh,
it's a tough one, right? I was thinking about this
this morning.
I think
the way that the NBA is headed, if I had to use half of a year of Trae Young in college and Lonzo for a full year at UCLA and then half of a year as a Laker, I would probably take Trae Young. Because I just think that Trae Young is, I'm not saying that I don't know if he's necessarily on the whole as good of a passer as Lonzo is, but he's much closer than I think most people realize, and he's a much, much, much better shooter and better offensive player in terms of scoring than Lonzo is.
It's so weird though. Like Lonzo in college shot 41.2% from 3.
Yeah, I didn't love him as a prospect though, Simmons. I thought they were mistaken to take him at number 2. He has an ugly, weird shot.
It is. It's really ugly.
It was he played on a soft team that played no defense, and then he got put in blender by De'Aaron Fox when they had to play in the tournament. By the way, as you will recall, that was a weekend that we had with 3 of our other mutual friends. We were in New Orleans watching UCLA play Kentucky in the Sweet 16, and there were 4 of us that were glued to the Sweet 16 game and watching De'Aaron Fox obliterate Lonzo Ball. Yeah. And then you were in the corner on your laptop being like, guys, Sixers, Raptors. But as it turned out, you were trying to just point out all these NBA games. But as it turned out, that night, you were right, because that was the night, as I may refresh your memory here, that was the night that Devin Booker scored 70 points against the Celtics.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, I gotta say, the Celtics have really improved their defense. I don't think that would ever happen this year, but Booker,
I just really got a kick out of
UK. He was a 6th man, and he scored 70 points in an NBA game.
He was great. No, it was great. But I got a kick out of how this was one of the most anticipated Sweet 16 games in recent memory. We were all pretty revved up for it. We had a UK fan among us, and I was interested to see how the game went. And you were kind of the guy in the back that was like, okay, guys, but and you're just reading off the slate of NBA games. You got this Eastern Conference matchup tonight.
Sixers Raptors. Jesus Christ. But
no, I don't know if it was Sixers Raptors.
But
that time, like I said, that night you ended up. I mean, I was laughing at it because it was just so. It's so something that either a college or pro fan will do when somebody else is focused on the other level of play. But you ended up. I think I felt like you were vindicated that night because of what Devin Booker did, and because that UK UCLA game didn't end up being that good of a game.
Yeah, I mean the way. Well, Devin Booker is he makes my heart rate go up. I'm excited about that guy. I still want him to stay healthy more. I think he's a little bit, tiny bit fragile. But well, for me, college has always been part of the colossal funnel that leads to the NBA. Like it's just it's a feeder system, just like all those wonderful foreign leagues. You know, like the grainy footage of Giannis, the Greek god, just dunking on all these smaller, inferior people. How did anybody know?
Drazen Petrovic in the 80s.
Yes, and this new guy Dokic, or what's his name?
Yep.
He looks.
the guy who's in the conversation for the #1 pick.
Yeah, he looks exciting. But it's all just, for me, all that is just a feeder system for the greatest and best top flight basketball league in the world, which is the NBA. And that's what makes the NBA so exciting for me, is because it's the best of the best. It's such a gauntlet to get there, and then once you're there, it's a gauntlet to become one of the greatest. And I don't see. I understand what you're saying, all the things you're saying about college, and I'm starting to warm up a little bit to it. And I think this year I'll be more into the tournament, but there's no world in which it will surpass NBA for me. I'm too ingrained.
Yes.
I'm too into
it. I think it's a different strokes thing, because I think that
strokes.
It's just what you appreciate and what you prefer.
Yeah.
Admittedly,
subjective.
The fandom and the history of the college ranks, and look, this is no knock on NBA history, because it has its own set of history, but it's just something that I'm more familiar with, and I feel like it's so much more. It's always so much more in the background and prevalent when college fans are talking than it is in the NBA. Now,
well, I mean, like Oklahoma has been playing since what? Like, I was just looking at their franchise when we were talking about Trae Young. Their first season was in 1907-08.
Right, exactly. So it's a little different, but like, I mean, there are certainly franchises in the NBA that I'm sure there are generations of fans who they talk about it, and it's like, oh, this thing happened to the Celtics last night. Remember that time in 1983 that Larry Bird did this, or that in 1964 that John Havlicek did this, or whatever. That exists, but I just associate that more personally with college. So part of the interest, I think, is admittedly much more self-serving, but it's the same thing with football. I mean, I personally enjoy college football because it is so much less polished, and you have these insane coaches who, like, just there's rarely any muzzle on them. There's no sort of corporatized culture the way that there is in the NFL. You got guys running 5 wide to score
crazy
in a
formations.
Pac-12. Crazy formations. It's
college,
not as good.
Sure.
The level of play is not as good. I consistently find it personally more entertaining than the pros. But in college basketball, I don't necessarily think that's always the case. I think a lot of the times, in terms of the quality of play and the watchability, especially in 2018, when the league has just the NBA has gotten so much better than it was when we were in high school. I mean, there were just, especially in the Eastern Conference, there were just a lot of really rough 78 to 74 games that I couldn't watch.
Yeah,
frankly.
No, I agree with you. I think they've created more of an incentive for these guys to try harder, and
the rule changes, and I think the rule changes and the way that teams like the Warriors have changed the game into this positionless basketball, and something that is more geared toward really what the Suns did. Don
Nelson with the Mavs and that one Warriors year with Baron Davis.
Absolutely. I think what the Spurs and the Warriors have done is that they've taken those models and they have just made them better. There are better players in those models, and there are better defenders. And the Suns and the Mavericks and the Warriors, the Don Nelson and the Mike D'Antoni teams, deserve a lot of credit for helping usher in this era that isn't, like Heat, Knicks, guys just punching each other under the basket for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then, the final is 73-71. It's much better to watch the NBA now than it was 15, 20 years, in that era post Jordan, maybe before like before like that LeBron and Wade. I don't put Carmelo in that class because I just have never enjoyed watching him play.
Wow. No, I agree.
Well, I mean, do you like watching Carmelo play basketball?
No, I'm just joking around, but no, I'm not a Carmelo fan at all. And you can see, even though the Knicks are below 500 this year, they play so much more unselfishly without Melo. They have such better team chemistry. They're a better offense. The list goes on and on. Ron Baker's there. Just
Ron Baker, the
glue guy with that crazy mask that he's wearing now.
The farm boy.
Yeah.
Yeah, the farm boy god, Ron Baker.
They call him Ron Burgundy. That's what they call him in New York. They really do.
Do they?
Yeah, that's his nickname, Ron Burgundy. It's kind of a lazy nickname.
Okay.
Kind of lazy.
Yeah, I don't really know how. I feel like we could do better than that.
Yeah. I don't even think he deserves a nickname. Let's be real. But yeah.
No.
Yeah.
But no. I mean, so part of it is related to sort of where I'm coming from with my own experience. If I were from a I don't think there's any question that if I were now you are sort of maybe a slight you are slightly unusual.
Outlier. I'm an outlier.
You're a bit of an outlier in the sense that you prefer the pro game, even though you're from an avowedly college first state. But I don't think there's any question, Ben, if we had grown up in Philadelphia or in Chicago or in San Antonio, that
Seattle Supersonics.
Yeah, that's not to say I wouldn't care about college, because I could still care about maybe both. But there's no question that I would have more of an investment, and I've just never really had an investment in a team. It's always been more in individual players, and that's like we're saying, like to each his own, right? The NBA sometimes can be fun as hell, and it can be like almost like technically proficient and beautiful, and almost like a fine dining experience. College sometimes can have more of a food truck appeal. Sometimes I like food trucks more than I like going to a 4-star restaurant, right?
We're getting back to the food again, which is
well,
lovely.
It just depends on what you prefer. I could point to a college game that anybody, I think, objectively would just love to watch. There are other terrible college games. I could point to an awesome Warriors versus Rockets game, like the game that was last Saturday night here in Houston. Or I could, if you get me on Magic versus Nets, I'm probably not going to be like as interested in it. So I think it depends on the game. It depends on who's playing. Styles make fights, all that cliche stuff. But I think building a bridge between these two is good. The last thing I'll say to wrap up here is I wanted to give you, since I am a historian by trade, I wanted to give you a little slice of college basketball history here. We just surpassed the 50th anniversary of what is known as the game of the century in college basketball. It seems like every sport has a game of the century for some reason in the 20th century. And, they can't all be, I guess they can't really all be games of the century, but they're referred to as such. And this one is, this one is a game that took place in January of 1968, January 20th, 1968 to be specific, in the Houston Astrodome. It was a game where the number one college team versus the number two college team played in the Astrodome. It is significant for a couple of reasons, Ben. First, up to that point, it was the largest crowd to ever watch a basketball game in the United States. Wow. 52,000 people got into the Astrodome that day. You could buy nosebleed seats for $1 or $2, or you could buy to sit like within 100 feet of the court. You could buy $5 tickets. Wow. Two undefeated teams. Houston wound up beating UCLA in this game, 71-69. Elvin Hayes scored 39 points in this game. He outplayed Lou Alcindor, who was in, I believe, the second of the 3 years that he played at UCLA. So I think back then I don't think freshmen played really, so I guess Lou Alcindor would have been a junior. Also, important caveat, this is not going to sell you on college basketball, by the way, but I should mention, from 1967 to 1976, dunking was not allowed in college basketball.
I remember that.
Which feels pretty low-key or maybe not so low-key racist, but it was not allowed. So, yeah. But you had these two big men who had an opportunity to display the array of post moves that they had in this game. But it's significant not only because it was the largest crowd to watch a basketball game up to that point, Ben, and with that, eventually it sort of foretold how college basketball on the biggest stage in March would end up being played in football stadiums, mostly to generate more revenue and put more money in advertisers in the NCAA's pockets. But it was also the first non-tournament game to be televised. It was a January game, and up to that point, college games were only on television when they happened in March. So it was sort of revolutionary in a couple of ways. It ushered in this era of playing in larger stadiums and maybe a willingness to play college basketball in non-traditional arenas. It also gave a preview of what was going to make college basketball such a significant sport in the coming decades, which was the TV contracts and putting these great players on CBS and eventually on, and I guess in some cases in the 80s on NBC and eventually on ESPN, because up to that point, if you wanted to see Lou Alcindor, now Kareem, if you wanted to see Bill Russell at San Francisco or Elgin Baylor at Seattle University, maybe University of Seattle, one of those, Bill Walton a couple years later at UCLA, you could only see them play in March, right? By the 80s, when you have Ralph Sampson at Virginia and Hakeem Olajuwon at Houston and Patrick Ewing at Georgetown, you could see these guys play like once or twice a week because they're on TV. And I think there's a sense maybe that people just assume that sports on television just sort of originated from post-World War II, and that's not really necessarily the case. It didn't start in this case until 23 years after the end of the war, and when television and TV culture sort of writ large was already much more of a thing in America. As you know, the 50s are known as like the golden age of television in America, but that did not translate over to this particular level of basketball. So this was an important game in that respect. You had two, John Wooden, the coach of UCLA, obviously, Guy Lewis, the coach of Houston, who coached that team with Elvin Hayes. They got to the Final Four. His next sort of big run as Houston coach would be 15 years later when he coached Phi Slamma Jamma, which had Clyde Drexler and Hakeem Olajuwon. The core of that team, they made three straight Final Fours. They never won a title, but that's a team that people in Houston, they still talk about here, you know, and that's an example of in the college ranks. You think University of Houston Cougars basketball, you think Phi Slamma Jamma and then Elvin Hayes, and so those are these sort of fleeting moments. And otherwise, it's been a program that has been largely sort of just unremarkable, and it's one of those programs where people are looking and saying, well, maybe with a couple good recruiting classes, if all we need is one or two good players, and we can get back to that age. And so that's one of those situations like that with college. But just a very significant game in the history of basketball and in history of college basketball in general. Houston wins that game. The return game, which was played in the Final Four in 1968, UCLA won by 32. They won 101 to 69. UCLA was like the Patriots in that era, in that if you played them enough, they were usually going to get you back, and they were usually going to win more than you won. They also happened to be retroactively it was revealed that they were cheating. So they also have that in common with the Patriots.
Really?
I
What
want
was this? I didn't know that.
Yeah, John Wooden was dropping bags. Are you familiar with the phrase dropping bags?
No. Is it like
dropping bags?
Taking a shit on the court?
That is not what that means.
Oh, okay.
But dropping bags is it's a phrase that it's been more popularized, I guess, by this college basketball podcast on The Ringer. They love the guys who host that, Tate and Mark.
Yeah.
They love to talk about this, but dropping bags is like when you drop the bag of cash, right?
Oh,
like how does this player end up at this small school, or how does so and so end up at whatever school? Usually somebody dropped the bag for him, right? And the bag might have $100,000. It might have $50,000. There's no telling. But John
blue
Wooden
chip style, blue chips.
John Wooden was breaking some rules. Don't quote me on exactly what he did, but I know after the fact.
I didn't know this.
That he was bending some rules.
Man.
Anyway,
no idea. Well, what did Lou Alcindor score in that first meeting? I can't find his stats. I can find Elvin Hayes'.
The box score is actually kind of hard to find.
I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
Oh well, we don't have to find out. It's okay.
Well, I was just gonna read you because box scores just weren't in the regular season in college. They just weren't as much of a thing as they are now.
Yeah.
And I think you can actually probably draw a direct line between that and the fact that it was televised and the coverage. But in the championship game that UCLA got their revenge, Kareem had 19 and 18.
Yeah.
Elvin Hayes struggled actually in that game, had only 10 and 5, and was in foul trouble. But I want to read you Elvin Hayes' stats from his senior year at Houston, right? This is a guy who went on to be who averaged a double-double in the NBA. He's an he's a basketball Hall of Famer, played for the Bullets, and then I think on either end of his career, played for the Rockets as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? In 38 and a half minutes a game, in 1967-68, Ben, Elvin Hayes averaged 36.8 points a game and 18.9 rebounds a game.
Oh. Wow. Yeah, that's Wiltian. He almost averaged a Wilt. Dan.
He did.
Mutual friend Dan likes to say. My goodness.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at looking at NBA stats, and they're no less impressive. I mean, actually, they are less impressive, but oh my goodness! I mean, he had a year where his first year in the NBA, he put up 28 and 17, and he had also another year where he had 21 and 18. He's a guy that I'm not as familiar with, and man alive, his stats are gaudy, and he finished his career in the NBA in Houston, which is kind of interesting.
It's interesting that program has had so much continuity relative to other programs in terms of Elvin Hayes, Clyde Drexler, and Hakeem. Okay, fine, that's just 3 examples, but it's still 3 guys who are prominent players and played for both the most prominent college team in the city and the pro team.
Yeah, interesting.
That's unusual. I don't think that happens. I don't think there's a ton of guys, especially a ton of guys of that caliber, who, for example, played on UCLA and then played on the Lakers. I mean, obviously Kareem is one example, but I don't think
Lonzo.
I could be wrong.
Future
Lonzo,
Hall of Famer.
Future Hall of Famer Lonzo Ball.
Future Hall of Famer LaMelo Ball.
Yeah,
you'll
exactly.
See. You'll see.
Yeah, but no.
Chino Hills to the Lakers.
That's right. There you go. But no, 50th anniversary of that game, an important game in college basketball history, an era when big men ruled, right? I mean, UCLA had a 2-year gap between when Alcindor left and Bill Walton arrived. Bill Walton played from 71 to 74, but
Big Red Giant.
The Big Red Giant, and UCLA they dominated in this era. This was a game where they were bested by Houston, but an important game and an interesting game with a lot of NBA connections, and with the Final Four now being routinely played in football stadiums where they put the court in the middle of the stadium. I have actually been to a couple Final Fours where that was the case. This was a significant thing. This was a big deal. So game of the century, 1968. Kind of crazy that you come upon the 50-year mark of that, and you look at how much the game has evolved and changed. But a cool
crazy.
milestone.
No, it's really cool. I'd heard of it. I remember watching a documentary about the Bruins of the Wooden era. I think maybe it was just a documentary about John Wooden. And strangely, Sam, the dropping bags thing was not in that documentary. I wonder why.
I wonder why.
They're trying to
By
hide
the way, the last thing I would add is that that game, looking at some of the background on it, more than one source said that game sort of made the career of a 33-year-old announcer named Dick Enberg, who was the UCLA announcer, and he was the one calling this game on national television. Dick Enberg recently passed away, I believe, last month. A great all-around announcer who did everything from the NFL to Wimbledon to baseball to, I mean, he could do any sport.
He could do it all. He's like Costas-in.
Yeah.
Costas-in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Or Costas is more Enbergian.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably more apt. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, just another interesting bit of context that this long-time respected announcer, this was sort of his this was sort of the country's introduction to him as a talent, as a play-by-play guy.
Indeed. No,
Yeah.
he's a legend. And well, it's been a pleasure, man. I'm excited to watch Trae Young progress and continue to put up gaudy stats.
Yeah,
he is. He's on quite a roll here, and as you said, it's fun to see him kind of, as I saw in an article this morning, throw a changeup and taking less shots.
Yeah,
He kind of threw off Kansas a little bit.
It's impressive because it shows that he's not a one-trick pony.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it shows that he can adjust his game, and being able to do that at such a young age, it's just, I think that is not to be taken lightly. Going forward, we can talk about some of these other college prospects, especially the freshmen like DeAndre Ayton at Arizona, a remarkable two awesome young big men this year in college, in Marvin Bagley the third at Duke, and DeAndre Ayton, I'm not sure how you say it, at Arizona. Both guys who are averaging double-doubles right now, and who you should certainly keep an eye on, because they will almost definitely be in the top half of the lottery.
Oh, Marvin Bagley,
barring injury. Yeah.
20 and 11.
Yeah.
21 and 11 a game.
Yeah, right. And both guys, go watch some footage of them this year. The way that they move, the way that they are both very fluid big men, and you can just see that the way that they play in today's game is just, I think it's going to translate very well to today's NBA. Although in a sense they are, especially in the case of Ayton, he is also in a sense sort of a throwback player, because he's a 7-1 guy who is mostly around the rim, but he moves like a 6'6" or 6'7" guy sometimes, and he's a freak. Mo Bamba at Texas is another guy. He's more of a defensive-minded sort of Nerlens Noel kind of type player, but
I like those guys.
Mo Bamba, another guy to keep an eye on.
Mo Bamba. So you think Trae Young's going to be an excellent NBA player?
Look, I mean, I don't know what the benchmark is, but like, if I had to put my money right now,
Steph Curry or bust.
Will he? Right. That's the Kemp way to think of sports, which is fun. But if I had to guess, will he make more than one All-Star team as a pro? I would say yes, he will.
Okay. So. Well, that's exciting. It's exciting. There is something fun about watching a guy in college. Even it was like watching LeBron in high school. I remember they had that game where Bill Walton was announcing, the high school game, and it's just fun to see. The hype train definitely starts chugging, and it can go way over the top, and it can be bad. It can be bad for the player in a way, but obviously LeBron handled it really well, and there's a lot of hype now for Trae Young, and I hope he he meets the hype, and I hope he is amazing in the NBA.
I hope so too. I think it's fun to see a guard do this. The last two guys really in the last 10 or 12 years that I can think of where there was this much hype for a young player, and someone out there could correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm leaving anyone out. But the two guys that come to mind who weren't guards, of course, were Kevin Durant in 2007 at Texas, and then Anthony Davis at Kentucky in 2012. Both just guys who, from the jump as college players, were just totally dominant. And
Greg Oden too.
Those, Greg Oden. I don't think he was. Look, Greg Oden put up stats. Okay, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that he was quite as much of a comet into the college basketball world as Durant and Anthony Davis was in terms of his dominance. But he was certainly incredible. That by no means am I trying to say Greg Oden wasn't good. He was very good, but I put Durant and Anthony Davis on a different level just because they were. They were immediately transcendent players who, not just looking at the box score, you just watched them play and they were dominant on the floor. They would take over games routinely. They would, especially in the case of Anthony Davis, they would affect the entire game, and they would affect the entire offense's game plan because Anthony Davis was such a good shot blocker. And in the case of Durant, no team had a guy in 2007 in college who could guard Kevin Durant because he was just such a unicorn.
Nothing has changed. Nobody can guard him now.
No, it really hasn't.
Literally nobody can. No, I'm not even joking. There's nobody in the world who can guard Kevin Durant.
And this is against the best
maybe
defenders
Kawhi.
in the world.
Maybe Kawhi
Imagine guys on Oklahoma State and Iowa State trying to guard him.
Yeah.
I mean, it was even, in some ways it was even more ridiculous.
Yeah, yeah. Kevin Durant, Giannis, LeBron, these guys are made in a lab. I mean, I know that's an oversaid a phrase to say someone's made in a lab, but these guys are physically, they're freaks, but also Kevin Durant's game is so deadly now. The mid-range jumpers, the range that extends beyond the NBA three-point line, he is and it looks so easy when he plays. It's really something to behold, and a lot of it's gotten overshadowed because of his social media hijinks and all that stuff, and he gets made fun of a lot on social media.
Right.
Perhaps rightfully so, depending on which
the narrative on him certainly changed when he went to the Warriors, right? Yeah. Fair or unfair, it's definitely changed. Yeah. And the way that a lot of people view him, not necessarily as a talent, but in terms of what his approach to winning and being a team player and whatever. I mean, people like LeBron and Kevin Durant, when they go to a team, the way that both of those guys went to a team, they're going to be judged for it, And I apart from that conversation, in both of those guys' cases, I just think individual talents, which again, to get back to what we've talked about previously about Tom Brady and about quarterbacks, I just think it's so much easier to cleanly and credibly evaluate these individual talents in basketball, where there are fewer players and the players are always on the court on both sides of the ball. I just think Durant and LeBron have been amazing to watch, and I hope both of them continue to play at a high level for many years to come.
Well, Samuel, LeBron just eclipsed the 30,000 career point mark.
I saw, and he wrote an Instagram post to himself congratulating himself, which was a little ridiculous.
So silly. I mean, that's the kind of stuff. When I have issues with LeBron, it's for stuff like that. It's just like, what are you thinking, man? But he's a really good guy. Like that was a real head scratcher. Like I was just sitting at the computer, like what the fuck was that? But I've mellowed on LeBron. I used to really not like him, but he's a great guy. He does so many good things for the community. Great off the court work.
Yep.
But man, he's got a shot now. He has to get. I mean, he's going to pass. You got Malone, you got Jordan, he's going to definitely pass Dirk. I hate to say it, but Dirk is in his
he is.
Dirk is next. But I think he's got a real shot to pass Kareem. I think he's got like over 8,000 points to make up. Last year, I think he almost put up 2,000 points, total points. He was like 19 something. The year before that, I think he was 19 something. So he's got to play probably like 5 or 6 more years, putting up, 1,500 to 2,000 points a year. It's gonna be a little hard. I mean, because he's like right now he's scoring 25 points a game. Now, you think in 5 years he's still gonna be scoring 25 points a game? Probably not. But
probably not. But he's also, we've never seen like anyone like him in terms of his durability and everything, right? I mean, it's just like you want to say no, but then it's also like I feel like people have been waiting, even the people, his critics especially, but even people who love LeBron have been waiting for him to fall off.
I mean, he's past due for an injury. He should have been injured like 6 years ago, and he still hasn't been injured.
This is like I know we are approaching the 2-hour mark here, so I'll make this quick. But this is sort of, I don't know, this might be a bit of a contrarian or hot take opinion, but and I would tie it back to the NFL and to someone like Tom Brady. I think it's much more impressive to me if Tom Brady ends up playing 2 or 3 more years at a relatively high level. Right now, you can debate about whether he deserves the MVP this year. I don't really think he does, but he's going to get the MVP for just being there, and I would give it to Todd Gurley. But nevertheless, I think that Brady, to me, it's much more impressive if he has that regular season statistical consistency for year in and year out than it is that he has the rings that he does. And I really just don't – I mean, I know a lot of people are going to define LeBron – when they think of LeBron versus Jordan, they're going to and if you look at a lot of the statistics, I think you can find statistics that favor Jordan. You can find statistics that favor LeBron, both advanced and otherwise. I think it's a lot closer than a lot of people think. Jordan has the edge in a lot of people's minds because of rings. But for me personally, I don't think that I'm ultimately going to evaluate LeBron's career from here on out and the totality of his career based on how many more rings he wins, which I know that drives people insane to hear that. But I just think, Ben, if he plays at the level or even like 85 or 90% of the level that he's playing right now, if he plays that way up through like 38 or 39, like to me, that's just going to be more impressive than if he happens to go somewhere else or stay in Cleveland and win 1 or 2 more titles. Because I just think if he were to do that at his size, in terms of his versatility and his passing ability, I would just think we would have never seen anyone that versatile and that dominant for that long. For that amount, just an absurd amount of time, to be that good, you know. And that has to. I mean, that would have to factor in for me personally. I know not everyone agrees, but
I think more people than you would think agree with you. But his basketball reference year by year stats is just staggering. I mean, it's like it's Karl Malone-esque, but it's like every year, 25. Oh, it's basically after his first year is 20 points a game, and then from that point on, it's just like 25, 29, 28. I mean, I'm not reading it off top. I'm just thinking off the top of my head. It's just if you like stats, which I would hope you do if you're listening to this podcast, go on his basketball reference and just sit down for a while. I don't know, maybe smoke a joint, have a beer, crack open a beer, and just marvel at those numbers because he's also putting up, over a steal a game, over a block a game. His career stats: 26 points a game, 1.6 steals, 1.1 blocks, 8.6 assists, and 7.9 rebounds. I mean, it's just you can talk about percentages and all these different things. Like he wasn't a great 3-point shooter, although he had years where he was very good. It just, I don't know. We can't get into LeBron. LeBron's going to have his own pod. Multiple pods, and we'll put it all into perspective.
Just real quickly, along the lines of what I've been on my soapbox about rings, like the year that the Heat won the title in 2013, you can make a really good argument, and I think I would believe you. And along the lines of the Falcons and the Seahawks blowing the Super Bowls against the Patriots, you could make a really good argument that the Spurs should have won that series.
You can make a great argument.
If they keep Tim Duncan in the lineup, and Ray Allen doesn't hit that three, then the Spurs win the series, and LeBron is 2-6 in the finals instead of 3-5. And I guess I would just
2015,
again, posit,
you could say the same thing.
You could say exactly.
Draymond Green.
But like, does LeBron like if Draymond doesn't hit LeBron, kick him in the dick, right? And if Ray Allen doesn't hit that shot,
I think he hit him in the dick with his hand. I think he slapped him in the dick, Sam.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
If he doesn't punch him instead of kick him, if he doesn't get himself suspended, if Andrew Bogut doesn't break his leg, if Ray Allen doesn't hit that shot, like those little plays, is LeBron like any less or more of a player? You know?
Yeah.
And
he probably is in mainstream eyes.
Which is insane, though. Don't you think that's insane?
Well,
I mean, that's just like it just shows you that players. It's like a razor's edge about how we think.
It really is,
because if Tom Brady were 3-4 in Super Bowls, he would get a lot of the shit that LeBron gets for being 3-5 in finals.
He still gets shit because he was beaten by the Giants. You know, these guys will always get shit.
Right.
And it's like Barkley. You know, like through all these guys' careers, there have always been some close calls. Like Nash that year when he was. I know it always comes back to Nash. I know. But he got pushed into the scores table by the hitman, that dirty Robert Horry. And then,
Amari left the bench.
Amari and Boris left the bench. And, what would have happened if they would have played that next game? I mean, they had just gone up 3-2 on the Spurs, and then those guys missed the next game. They lost that game, and then the Spurs ended up winning the series. It's like there's all sorts of, in another Suns example, I'm sorry for going and doing this, but there was that 2010 series where Ron Artest gets this crazy bounce, carry him off a offensive rebound and hits this corner three. In a game that the Suns, if they had won, they would have gone up 3-2. Mm-hmm. It's just that was in the conference finals. Ron Artest, who famously would just take all these ill-advised shots and miss them pretty consistently. It's just my point is that there's the moments in every one of these guys' careers that could go either way. And yeah, it's a little unfair to label somebody not clutch or whatever you want to call it, especially with if you look at the stats, I think LeBron is leading the league in clutch points this year or something like that. But in his career, he's got like a crazy percentage of clutch, makes. I don't know. It's what can we say? It's a can of worms, my friend. But no, we should probably end this pod. We've been going for almost 2 hours, man. Or is it 2 hours?
We are approaching the 2-hour mark, yes.
My goodness. Well, you've broken the record. We put up some gaudy stats.
I'm sorry. I love college basketball, Ben. I'm sorry.
You do? I didn't know.
I love it. I could talk about it for hours.
No, I'm just starting to kind of rub off me a little bit. I'm starting to get interested. I'm going to be following these guys.
But I also love the narratives in the NBA, like you're saying. Like what you're saying is totally true. Suns fans would have zero sympathy for the Spurs whining about the 2013 title because they would say, y'all took the 2007 title from us.
Yeah, they took multiple titles from us.
I love that stuff, though. There's so much to that in college basketball, too, right?
Them across the face.
Kentucky fans, like a bunch of their titles, well, we would have won this year, but this happened. Now, whether you agree with that or not, it's just always it's a fun, like, barroom, bar conversation to have, when you're in a booth at a bar and talking to buddies and stuff.
Yeah, you got to be in a booth. You got to be in a booth.
Or on Twitter.com, a place that is known for its rational discourse, etc.
Oh, man, what a clusterfuck that is of social media. All right, well, this is some delicious content that we created here. This pod's going to be over 2 hours with the intro factored in, and it's been an absolute pleasure. I could go for another 2 hours, but
So could I. Basketball, listen, Ben, I love talking about basketball. Basketball is my favorite sport.
I like to dribble the
ball
when they dribble
up and down the court.
Yeah, there you go. Keep it going.
And I would love to keep talking about it in the future.
As would I. I enjoy when they pass that pumpkin to and fro, and they let it fly. Don't you know? I'm trying to rhyme here. Doing some poetry. A little poetry at the end of the pod. All right. We're done, Sam. Thank you, my friend. I'll talk to you soon.
Later, man.
Later, buddy.